thinkers, B2B marketing has never been that easy. But man, it got a heck of a lot harder in 2020. In a survey we recently fielded among 110 B2B CMOs, 97% acknowledged that they had revised their marketing plans in 2020. I mean, 2020 was already going and they're revising their plans as of March, April, May. 48% had to start completely from scratch. 81% were scrambling to find replacements for physical events, and 58% had already faced budget cuts. In sum, it's ugly out there, and demand generation has become priorities 1, 2, and 3 for just about every CMO. So in this episode, we're going to be breaking down exactly how to build a demand-generating marketing engine that will help you survive, if not thrive, whatever challenges are thrown at you. Joining us today is Kevin Fleece, a veteran of the tech world whose experience includes big brands like SAP and HP, as well as starting up an online travel company back in 2007. Now, I first met Kevin in 2015 when he was VP of Marketing at Cvent, and more recently had the pleasure of working with him in his role as Senior Vice President of Marketing at Cofense. Kevin, welcome to the show.
Hey, Drew, it's great to be here. Thanks a lot.
So I was looking at your LinkedIn profile yesterday, and was struck by the dates of when you started Travel Muse, 2007, right before the Great Recession, as it is called. Now, did you take some hard-earned lessons away from that experience?
Oh, you bet. Wow, you know what? Coming out, I had just left SAP, which was a fantastic place to kind of cut your teeth in product marketing and go to market and what it means to really do things at scale. Fantastic experience. Then I had the good fortune of being recruited as an entrepreneur in residence at a venture fund. And let me tell you, it was my first foray into B2C. It was my first foray working with venture capitalists. It was my first foray in online travel.
Oh my
So
gosh.
I guess you could say there was no playbook for that one either.
Right.
And I remember walking off the stage at the demo conference, which was one of the top 2 startup conferences in the country, along with the TechCrunch conference, where I walked off and I think I checked my BlackBerry because I don't think I had an iPhone yet. And I saw that Lehman Brothers had just collapsed. So you talk about kind of a brutal time to be starting a hospitality business online. That would be it. But I did learn a ton about the importance of digital, being digital first, because as a B2C business, I think B2C businesses have always been several years ahead of B2B in terms of the adoption of digital trends. So that was a fantastic place to kind of build some muscle memory around understanding user acquisition, customer acquisition, but what it also means to be prepared to pivot when faced with uncertainty.
So do you think there's some parallels to where we are now from that? So you got into 2008, 2009, shit hit the fan. It was a pretty painful period for most of us. I know it was the hardest period for Renegade. But in terms of how you think about the COVID period and the changes that a lot of marketers have had to face, do you see similarities?
Yeah, I kind of feel like 08, 09 was definitely a shock to the markets, brought on obviously by the banking crisis and the collapse of the housing market. But in comparison to what we're going through right now, it was relatively transient and kind of a fleeting thing. I think what we're going through right now is far more systemic, and where marketing leaders really need to take the opportunity to think about not just today. And what day is it? Is this March 243rd? I lost track. But not just what's happening today, this week, or next quarter, but really this is something that's going to be with us for quite some time. I just saw today that Google announced that their work from home policy has been extended to July 2021.
There it is.
So, but if you love transformation, it's never been a better time to be a marketer.
Well, perfect. So that gets us to what we're the subject of today, which is how to build a marketing engine that drives demand. And let's face it, as I mentioned in the beginning, we need demand. It's really hard. I'm just going to throw a couple things out there that make it really hard, which is we have this new character called the CFO, This is the no bird in the organization that every single vendor has to get through now, even on smaller purchases. And so these businesses are looking at a situation where if they can't prove that they can save the company money or make the company money in a very short period of time, it is really hard to get in the door. There are lots of businesses that are getting the call me in 6 months line, right? I'm interested, but call me in 6 months. So let's start with where do we start when we're trying to build a demand generation engine?
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head in so much as you have to prove the value of what you're doing. I mean, that's always been true in marketing, but I think now with the CFO just kind of, as you said, scrutinizing every purchase, it's really incumbent upon CMOs to be able to show that return on marketing investment, hard dollars. I think one of the things I've learned over my career is there are a lot of influence marketing metrics out there, but at the end of the day, what gets COOs and CEOs and CFOs excited is demand gen. Not just leads, but to the degree to which those leads turn into business. So you need to be able to actually show what I call marketing originated bookings or marketing originated sales. For every dollar you put into that marketing engine, how many dollars is the business getting back out? That's really what the CFOs want to see. And if you're able to quantify that and they believe the data, and you have to have a meeting of the minds with the CFO so they believe the data, but then I think you have a great platform to say, why wouldn't you want to step on the gas if we're going to generate $3 every dollar we spend? So you have to prove the value each and every day, and really understanding your metrics is central to that.
So it's a great place to sort of, that's where we're trying to get to. Marketing originated sales, I think is a nice summation. It's hard to do for some businesses, but so where do we, that's the goal. So let's just talk about piece by piece. How do we get there? I know that you mentioned earlier, we got to be digital first. So do we start with our website? I mean, where are we starting? If you're looking at it, you're arrived at a company, you're a new CMO, they don't have a demand generation. Where do we start?
I think you do start with the website. I think obviously now more than ever, with so much business moving online, arguably all of it, you have to recognize that your website is your storefront. It's the homepage. It's the front door to your business. And, we've all seen the Gartner stats or the Forrester stats that 65, 75% of the buyer's journey happens before they talk to anyone in sales. Well, they're going to your website and they're going to your competitor's website. So that's where it begins. And I think part and parcel to having a successful website right now is really having a clear and compelling message right up front. It sounds so simple to do, but you need a hook. You need something provocative and aspirational and, dare I say, empathetic right now, that really shows you understand your customers and your prospects' plight. The goal used to be, get your customer promoted. Now the goal is to help your customer's business survive this pandemic and maybe help them grow along the way. So you need a very succinct and provocative message. And then you need a simple user experience. I spent a lot of time as a product manager. You mentioned Travel Muse. I also launched a comparison website for hotel shopping called Room 77. Again, all of that kind of work in B2C really opened my eyes to the importance of simplicity. So your website needs to be light. It needs to be airy. Less is more. Focus on snackable content and get them to that call to action as quickly as possible. So you want to hook them with the message and give them a reason to explore a little bit more deeply.
So simple is hard.
Yes.
It really is. And you and I, we've had lots of conversations about this because things happen. You have a product and then you add another product and then you add another product and you may or may not be at a platform yet. You have this, it gets complicated and product managers say, hey, we want to sell this. And the other one says, and so you had two things that you want to keep simple. One, the message, and then two, sort of, if you will, we'll call it the website experience. We could start with the challenge just of keeping the message simple. That's even an exercise in and of itself, right?
Yeah, for sure. And having been through this process and, we partnered on this at Cofense in terms of helping us really elevate our brand purpose. And, it's about really essentialism. It's about understanding what's essential to your business and what's essential, more importantly, to your customers. Um, you know, Most SaaS businesses are multi-product businesses, but let's be honest, not all products are created equal at any given point in time. What are those demand drivers? What are those strategic products or services that your business offers that are going to be the growth drivers of your business? You need to put your attention there. It's a little bit of this over that. It's making those trade-offs. Just like a product manager would prioritize features in a backlog, marketers need to prioritize messages that they want to communicate to the market.
And I think that's such an important point right now, because a lot of companies that I'm talking to that are at least hanging in there, if not growing, are doing so because their existing customers, they're actually selling in more products or services. So if you think about what is the product that has the least resistance that you can get in the door with, right?
Okay.
And then, so that one got to get you in, then you can sell on top of that. I think that's an interesting way to think about demand generation right now, rather than necessarily trying to sell in a whole suite. It's like, what can I get in that will make a difference?
Yeah, and I think maybe a third tenet then, just building on the website discussion, simplified message, simplified user experience, and that I'd argue frictionless trial, wherever possible. Whatever you can do to remove impediments from that trial process is incredibly important. Right now, if obviously free is an incredibly powerful tool. I still see a lot of, B2B SaaS websites that say, get a demo, and I have to fill out a form to get a demo. And I understand that because some products require, a solution engineer to do a custom demo. But to the extent you can be more transparent, make your product visible, let them experience it, whether it's a digital product or a brick and mortar product. And if it's a digital product, you look at the growth of Atlassian and Slack and some of these high growth SaaS B2B businesses. It's been little embers, little fires that kind of start within the organization. And then all of a sudden you have a conflagration of multiple little fires, and all of a sudden you have an enterprise license. So again, my world is B2B SaaS. And so I definitely think to the extent you can offer up your products in a frictionless, think e-commerce model, the more happy your sales team is going to be, because you know what, those are real qualified opportunities.
You just said something interesting about free, and there's a lot of things there's different things you can give away. It doesn't have to be your product, but if you give the product away, how do you make sure that that actually turns into revenue?
Yeah, so you need a really strong sales and marketing handshake when you run a trial like this. So when you get customers signing up for a free trial, once that happens, the onus really does move to sales and solution engineering to check in on those customers, make sure they have everything. It's almost like onboarding a paid customer. They need to have a sense of your customer experience and what is it going to be like to be a paying customer of this business. So you really do want to make sure that you give them almost that white glove treatment and ensure that that trial is successful for them, that they're getting value out of that solution or service. So you need to have a dedicated solution engineer or sales rep assigned to every one of those customers who signs up for your free trial, and make sure that you're checking up on them almost every week as they go through that process.
And then so you have a limit on the date, and at some point in time, you're in there, they're using it, they're liking it. And again, as you talked about with the Atlassian example, once you get a bunch of users in there for free, they end up expanding. And it's interesting, I had on the show the CMO of a training company, and they had free April, and they gave away all their courses for the month of April. And it turned out that actually increased revenue substantially, because a lot of end users ended up being corporate users, and companies realized, oh, we have more users out there than we thought, let's up the license. So good things happen once you get trial. It seems so obvious, but so figure that out. All right, now there's a second part of free, which is sort of IP, right?
Yes.
And this is, and it's a little bit different than snackable content, because this is, snackable content is 500-word blog post. When you're giving away something significant, like a research study or something, I think it's a different thing. And you did a lot of that at Cofense.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, the foundational part of the website is the core message, the simplified experience, and an easy way for me to interact with your solution. Going beyond the foundation is building out that sort of content marketing platform. And every business, regardless of the vertical you're in, has unique insights and knowledge that is valuable to its customers and prospects. At Cofense, as a security business, we had this tremendous threat intelligence team that was constantly identifying new and emerging phishing threats, which of course are timely and interesting and relevant to a broad audience. A couple in particular, not surprisingly, we saw a huge increase in COVID-19 themed phishing emails. And so we launched a COVID-19 info center, helping organizations identify what they can do to help protect themselves from COVID-19 phishing threats. And we published a gallery of real phishing threats, hundreds and hundreds of these. And we made it searchable, made it very easy for people to find this information. And then to promote it, we would run webinars, thought leadership webinars on these specific topics. And we just saw a tremendous response in terms of the interest, because the topic was timely and relevant and important to a broad audience. 6 months earlier, we saw a sextortion threat emerge. And this is a kind of a salacious topic, but sextortion are these phishing emails that try to get you to turn over $100 worth of Bitcoin. Otherwise, they're going to share allegedly improper pictures or so forth. It's all BS. These are scammers. So by the way, if you ever get one of these, just ignore it. Don't pay the ransom, just delete it. But it's a topic that was incredibly frightening and scary to people. And it drove a lot of interest. We had a data set of 300 million emails that we put behind a secure search engine. And we allowed individuals to determine if their particular email address or their company's domain had been impacted. And we saw lots and lots of organizations lining up to say, hey, we think we've been impacted. What can you do to assist us? So to your point, we put together, and it wasn't even a research document, simple infographics, can do a lot for an organization, particularly in a topic like this, where there's a lot of awareness training that needs to happen. We would create almost like infographic posters to help organizations determine what can you do to remain cyber smart in the face of COVID-19 or in the face of sextortion threats. And of course, we were paying it forward, so to speak, to the industry by sharing all this information. But the benefit to us was it was a huge lead generation tool.
So if I'm going to sort of recap where we are so far, we have a clear and simple message overall for the company. We have a website that has that clear and simple message. And then we have either a sort of free offer, which is the product in some way or way, some kind of trial version of it. And then there's some really strong, compelling content. And what's interesting about this strong, compelling content is that you can create once, use multiple times, right? Once you had the data set, you created a webinar, you created infographics, you had blog posts, you got PR that drove traffic. So now we've done a lot of things that help sort of bring people in and get them engaged in it. What are some of the other things that you found have been effective in sort of nurture streams or other areas of demand generation? Because very few times someone come to your website and click buy, right? It's just it doesn't happen very often. And if it did happen, it's not happening as often right now.
Yeah, absolutely. So I always think about it as sort of two types of leads. There are, I'll call them those high value leads. I want pricing. I want a demo. I want your free trial. Those are the ones you respond to instantaneously if you can, because they're actively shopping and showing intent. And they might represent 10% of the leads in your organization. The other 90% are those that are doing their research, taking their time, doing a lot of self-education. So there, the onus is on the business to make sure that you track each and every interaction. You know, from live events, whenever those happen again, you know, scanning leads at booths. I remember those good old days. To tracking the download of that infographic from your website, to them interacting with one of your nurture emails. But I think what's really important is, you know, organizations have a tendency to oftentimes compete with themselves with too many calls to action. So what has worked well for me is you want to make sure that all of your campaigns ideally unify toward a single call to action. And if it's driving a free trial of a particular product right now, that call to action needs to be persistent and ubiquitous across all of your different landing pages and all of your different assets, ideally, so that you're constantly promoting that offer to that customer or that prospect. So you need marketing attribution for those that are shopping, and then you need a scoring model. You know, what I've seen work effectively is you want to basically look at organizations in terms of their company size, what's relevant to you. I mean, if you target SMBs, you want to score SMB prospects higher than enterprise. My business experience has been typically on the enterprise side. So we would, you know, score somebody who has 10,000 employees higher in A. And then title plays a role. So are they a decision maker or are they an end user? And then whatever verticals you are targeting. So if you think about those three dimensions, company size, title, and vertical, and you develop a scoring model, and then you assign a value to each of those interactions that's happening in that shopping process, what you can do is you can deliver to your sales team, your BDRs, a set of scored leads. I call them dynamic leads as opposed to high value leads. They're dynamic because they've taken a whole bunch of different actions, and then one morning, voila, that prospect just scored to 85 because they just completed their third or fourth action. So you need to think about them as two different audiences and how you handle them. And that SLA with sales is going to be very different between a high value and a dynamic lead.
SLA as in?
Well, service level agreement, but basically it's the handshake with sales that says, hey, look, if you get a dynamic lead, you're going to follow up within, or they agree to follow up within 2 hours, an hour, 24 hours, whatever works for your business. For those dynamic leads, those leads where they've been shopping with you for a period of time and they've taken a series of actions and they stopped by your trade booth and they scored up, we're going to follow up with those in order of the score or the letter grade. So we're always working the highest value leads first.
Right. And that's really important, right? I mean, all the studies say that if somebody is interested and you contact them within an hour, you have a much higher likelihood than if you did it 24 and a week later, it's dead.
Yeah, that's so true. I mean, I think the data is something like if you respond within 10 minutes with an email and a phone call, the likelihood of converting that lead goes up by like 7x versus waiting a day. Because you don't know, they might be filling out that same form onto your competitor's website. So oftentimes it's a little bit of a horse race. The best experiences I've seen have always included an email and a phone call follow-up from a real human being within a very short period of time. And they've taken the time to do a little bit of research about me and my business so that when they put that initial call out, there's an element of personalization.
Right. So, okay. So one of the things that you mentioned early on that I just want to make sure that is crystal clear is there are people who are showing buyer intent signals, and they are doing it, you know, as Kevin said, by visiting your pricing page. That is a clear one. And so I'm curious, a lot of companies right now are using, you know, services like Drift that have the real time sort of, you can engage with a person at that moment. Is that really something in your mind that will dramatically improve demand generation?
I think so, especially if you're, I think particularly for, as you mentioned early on, Drew, a lot of businesses are figuring out, how do I sell more to my existing installed base? So, you know, tools like Drift allow you to actually forward that chat message to the actual account manager for that account. So if it's an existing customer who's on a new product page, I want that going to my account manager, Drew,
Right.
not to an anonymous BDR.
Right.
So I think in that cross-sell model, having a conversational marketing tool like that on your website and then having it instrumented so that, sure, if it's a pure prospect who's unknown to the business, that can go to your inside sales or BDR team. But if this is a customer that we've cookied and we know that this is an important customer, route it to the rep. Keep that personal connection active and alive.
We've spent the first two segments really focusing in on how to build a demand generation engine. But very early on, you mentioned the importance of having clarity of purpose. And I want to, since we work together on this, I want to circle back and talk about the process of one, just so grateful that we did that before COVID. Can you imagine trying to do a rebranding exercise now?
No, not at all.
No,
I am
no, and
too. I'm so grateful too, because I feel like having that lasting purpose, that essential message is really helpful for an organization right now to sort of weather the storm. You need that organizational North Star. And if you have a strong purpose, that is helpful for you to kind of, regardless of which way the wind is shifting right now, and right now it's sort of blowing directly in our faces, it gives you something to focus on.
So let's talk a little bit about it. Of course, I'm quite familiar with the process that we went through together, but talk about, from your standpoint, if you had to do sort of the Cliff Notes version of the process that we went together to help articulate Cofense's purpose.
Yeah. So, for me, it was really about, so the backstory there is that Cofense had rebranded or changed its name about 2 years prior from FishMe to Cofense. And FishMe, the name, sort of immediately describes what the business does. It's in phishing. Cofense is a little more nebulous and really needed a little bit more explanation. And so the rebranding that we worked on actually came 2 years after the name change. And it was really about helping to uncover and working together to uncover what is core and central to the business, what above all else matters to us as a company and to our customers. And so, it was what I liked about the process was you guys worked at our speed, which was fast. We kept it very simple. I wrote down 3 things here. The process was interviews, observation, and instinct. IOI. That's what I wrote down. So, you guys interviewed our C-suite and a number of customers, but you also did a lot of observation of us as a business and our space. And then you let instinct take over, which, I think is honed from working with lots and lots of CMOs and lots of companies. So it was very simple, and I guess true to the name or true to your slogan of cut through the noise, you really helped us do that and get to an answer. What I found unusual about the process, but ultimately really liked about it, was the innate ability your team brought to help us really dial in quickly to what that statement was. And I remember you saying a purpose-driven statement shouldn't be more than 6 words. Well, somehow we landed on 4 words. So I feel like that was a real success. And by the way, it's uniting humanity against phishing, which I think is something that is clearly memorable. So it worked for our employees. The sales team embraced it as something that they could easily communicate to their customers. And I think it ultimately touched our end users as well, and really helped them feel like they're part of this journey, that there's a common enemy, which is phishing threats. And it really helped galvanize and focus all of our different constituents.
Yeah, it's funny as I think back on that experience, and I love your IOI, as we were going through, and this is, we do a lot of interviews and we're really listening in a couple of different ways. And what we kept hearing was this notion of that you were bringing people together and technology together. It just kept resonating, and these products were working together. So for us, it's this puzzle that happens as we're developing these purpose-driven story statements. And you really were, there's a deeper story than Uniting had a lot of meaning, both in the present and in the future for the brand in terms of where you were headed. But one thing that you also mentioned that is really important in these things is sometimes the brand name tells you what category you're in, but sometimes it doesn't. And when it doesn't, and you're a new brand, your purpose-driven story statement really does need to ground you in your category, because
Mhm.
otherwise you still have to do, oh, we're fishing, we're in the fishing business, right? So you have you're Cofense, and then we have another line, and then we have to explain that we're in the fishing business. So there was a lot going on in those 4 words.
Mhm.
And one of the things that you said very early on was the need in a purpose-driven story statement to be bold and to sort of differentiate and be purposeful. And so we kind of went big with humanity.
Yeah.
It's right, right. Uniting humanity against phishing is a thing, and I truly believe that that was something that your founders felt deeply in their hearts, that that's what they were doing, that they were purposely trying to bring the world against this common enemy. So it's kind of cool. But what I loved about it afterwards is that you did execute against employees, customers, and prospects, and that feels so. You have that idea, and then can we circle back to purpose? Now that you had that idea, you went through this exercise, how that helps from a demand generation standpoint to sort of close the loop on our story and episode.
Yeah, and I think that is a great way to literally take it full circle. So we talked about the website as the front door to your business and having a compelling message. Well, having that purpose-driven statement that really communicates the essence of what you do quickly and succinctly and in a way that is provocative is really important. So the brand is the foundation from which the messaging flows. And once you have the messaging, I really believe everything else becomes so much easier because it aligns your campaigns. It makes it clear about who your target segment is. It helps align the sales organization around who we're going after and what we stand for. But you have to have that foundational messaging in place. It is essential to everything else that follows, including demand gen.
Interesting. Yeah. And it is really a debate because when a CMO takes a job, there is an expectation that you're going to be able to drive demand really quickly. And a lot of CMOs, that's the first task, and looking for a quick win. And I can't argue with that because you have to sort of build credibility and so forth. But ultimately, your biggest accomplishment will be sort of grounding the brand and having an impact against employees, customers, and prospects. Okay, so as we wrap this up, and since we're going back to creating a demand generation engine, what do you think from your past experience? What doesn't work?
Um, I mean, look, I think you have to be laser focused right now on who is your audience and what makes them tick. So what doesn't work is the proverbial spray and pray. You have to go deep in terms of your buyer community, their personas, and their goals. So what doesn't work is, mass market, top of funnel lead gen, blindly bidding in Google AdWords. Um, email fatigue is something that as organizations need to be very mindful of right now. You run the risk of driving a lot of opt-outs if you over email your contacts, but you also run the risk of message confusion. If you're not really clear about that, the brand and the offer and your message, and you're consistent in that message, you're going to alienate your audience either by over hitting them with too many contacts or by delivering too many disconnected messages. So again, what works is laser focus on your buyer community right now and their particular pain point, and being very, very succinct and clear in terms of the message and the offer you want to provide them. And I think, really successful marketers in this age of COVID are starting to incorporate some element of customer empathy in that messaging. So if you just come across as hawking your wares as opposed to really understanding your customer's business, you will be dismissed out of hand, not only as just being spammy, but also being somewhat tone deaf to what's happening out in the market right now.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point, and it was such a good summary. I had all things, I was ready to summarize, and then you did it for me. So, Kevin, thank you so much for spending time with us on the show. For all, it's just been great. I really, I feel like if you listen to this episode and you don't have a clear, if simple didn't come through, you just weren't paying attention. Keep your message simple, stay focused on your target, on your message, on your product. You can't market all products the same way at the same volume. Kevin, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you, Drew. I really enjoyed it.
And for all the listeners, if you enjoyed this episode, you can thank me by writing a 5-star review on your favorite podcast channel or by sharing the show with a fellow marketer. Renegade Thinkers Unite is written and directed by Drew Neiser. Hey, that's me. Audio production is by Sam Beck. Show notes are written by Melissa Caffrey. The music is by the amazing Byrne Twins, and intro voiceover is Adam Cornelius. To find the transcripts of all episodes, suggest future guests, or learn more about quite possibly the best B2B marketing agency in New York City, visit renegade.com. And until next time, keep those Renegade thinking caps on and strong.